So I checked that on the mobile and I got 60 frames per second, very easy, didn't really drop below 50 at any point in time. So hopefully you've got really good frame rates as well on your mobile device so that we know that this works now. It's always important just to check it at stages as you're working through this, just to ensure that it's not falling too low on your mobile device. Don't leave it right till the end of the project to actually test it on the mobile device. Okay, you can also have a remote setup, so you can use an emulator effectively to emulate on mobile device. It's not as effective as actually testing it on the device itself, because it's still technically running on PC, so it's relying on the PC architecture to run. You can get misleading information on your mobile device. It's always better to actually export an APK and then actually install it on your mobile device to see it as it's going to effectively run as an end product. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to actually put in the arms, the player arms. Okay, so I'm just going to switch off my gizmos for the moment and then find the low poly FPS pack and the components, and then we should have some meshes and the arms. Okay, and I'm going to be using the Handgun 01, and I'm just going to drag these into the hierarchy. Okay, now I want them to be roughly in the same position as the main camera, so I'm just going to drag my arms and Gun 01 onto the parent. Okay, and where I have my main camera, it's currently positioned at 000, so I want my arms to also be positioned at 000 to begin with. Alright, so they're in the same position as the camera now, and now it's just a case of actually moving around the arms until they match up in the viewport. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of move down on the Y a little bit, and X, just move it over just a little bit, and I might actually just push it forward on the Z just a little bit. Alright, I think that looks relatively good. Now just make sure that the arms are actually attached to the main camera, not to the parent. So now that they're lined up perfectly, I'm just going to click and drag onto the main camera. This means that wherever the main camera goes, the arms will then follow. Now at the moment it has an animator but no animator controller. Okay, so if I go to Window, Animation and Animator, this will open this window, and currently there's nothing in there. Okay, so we need to create something that allows us then to use any of these animations that we can see here. Okay, so I'll do so inside of this folder. I'm going to right click, choose Create and an Animator Controller, and I'll call this Arms, which is fine. Then as soon as you do that, by the way, you get these little blocks that show up in your animator window, because now you've got an actual controller. Just going to click on the arms and Gun 01, drag this into the controller so that now it's bound, or it's binded rather, to the arms. So it's going to be controlling those. So the first animation that I want from the list is going to be the idle. So let me find that. I've got idle at Handgun. Now if you want to check that out and see what that looks like, just click on it, then you can press play. This is currently what it looks like. It's just this idle animation. It is set to loop, which is important. So I'm just going to click and drag that into here, and now that's the animation that will play. So if I go over to my simulator now, the hands should actually start to animate. There we go. So now we've got the idle animation actually play. Okay, now in terms of the materials and those kind of things, we'll change those later because it doesn't look too effective at the moment. But over in the animator, every now and then we're going to want to shoot. Alright, so let's find our shoot animation. So I think it's going to be this fire handgun. Let's take a look. Okay, that's where it comes back. Let's see, fire pose. Nope, nothing. So fire handgun. Yeah, I quite like this one, I think. this fire handgun. Make sure that this one is not looped, which it isn't to begin with. You only want this to play once. Okay, so I'm going to drag that into this window. Notice that this one is grey and the other one is orange. Orange basically means that that is the default animation that will play over and over again. A grey block means that it's a secondary animation that needs to be called using a transition. So if I right click on the handgun and choose make transition, that will allow me then to connect the two animations together. If I click on this line, it shows the transitions between these. At the moment there are no conditions, so it will go directly from this animation to that animation. If I show you what this looks like, in fact let me just right click, make a transition going back to idle so that we have this constant loop. If I show you what this looks like at the moment, okay, he's going to play an idle animation and then he's going to shoot. Okay, wait for that. There we go, and we got a shoot and then back to idle again. Well, what we want is only for the shoot to actually happen when we press a button on screen. Okay, so to do that, we're going to go over to our parameters and we're going to choose one of our parameters using the plus button. And the one that we want is actually a trigger. Trigger will just simply play the animation once and return. So I'm going to call this fire. Now, what I can do, on this transition going this way down to the fire, on my conditions I can click plus and just call that trigger. Okay, make sure it doesn't have exit time. If it has exit time, it has to play the entire idle animation before playing the fire. If it doesn't have exit time, it immediately goes from idle to fire. Okay, now the transition going back should have no conditions and it should have exit time. That means it has to play the entire fire animation and then it goes back to idle. Okay, so if I play it to the simulator now, you will notice that it will only play the idle animation. You will never see it fire because that trigger never gets set. Okay, great. So that's what we want. Now we might also need to reload our gun as well. So let me find that animation. I think it's reload out of ammo. Yep, so then we've got this. So let's drag this one on. And I'm going to put this maybe in this position. In fact, we'll probably only ever call it from the idle, never from the firing. So I'll put it up here, which is fine. Once again, going to right click, make a transition to the reload, right click, make a transition back. Okay, but once again, this is just going to play now, no matter what, because it doesn't have any conditions. So let's once again do another trigger, and let's call this reload. So on the transition going from idle to reload, let's make sure it has a condition of reload. Just call that, and it doesn't have exit time. And then the transition back plays the entire animation because of the exit times. There's no condition, so it goes immediately back to idle. Alright, excellent. So now we've set up our animations for our arms. Now at the moment the arms look pretty weird because of the material. So if we just check the material, I believe it's on arms, it's using a standard shader. And that's why it looks kind of crazy. So what I want to do is go over to mobile and choose unlit. Okay, and then instantly it kind of matches this scene a lot better. Now you don't get that nice kind of I'll just show you. If I go back to standard, you can see all the kind of like variations of light on the arms. Well, if we choose mobile unlit, you kind of lose a lot of that, but I kind of like this cartoony style. If you still want to see that light bumping off that, I think diffuse will give you slightly better, but once again it's very dark. That's simply because our directional light is switched off. If I were to put that onto mixed or something, real time, nope, okay, doesn't want to do that. It's just really dark basically, so I'm going to change that to unlit. Much prefer that. We've also got the gun as well, by the way, which also has its own material on it. standard. Let's go to mobile and unlit. Okay, there we go, that's much better. And I also believe that we've got, oh no, they're fine. They're sharing the same material. We've also got a knife as well. Alright, so if we take a look at the knife, it's there. We're probably never going to use the knife, so what we can do here is actually get rid of this. So whenever you've got an item that's blue, basically means it's a prefab and it's attached to this original object here. So if I right click on it, choose prefab and unpack completely, it gets rid of that blue and it's no longer attached to this. It now only exists in this particular scene. So I can actually modify this without changing the original. So I can click on knife, just press delete to get rid of that. We don't need it. Okay. Now if I move over to shaded wireframe, what we're going to see is that most of our objects are really low poly, except for our arms. Okay. And particularly that gun as well. If you take a look at the gun, it's got loads and loads of polygons on there, and we just don't need it to be that high detailed. So what I've done is reduce the amount of polygons for this model. You can do that yourself in Blender for any models that you want, and I've got that video on YouTube that shows you how to do that. So if we go to mobile game resources, low poly arms, I've actually reduced the polygons. So if I go to handgun, where we can see our mesh, handgun 01, we're going to replace this with 03 handgun 01. Instantly it's reduced in terms of polygons. Okay. We also have the handgun 01 iron sights, which is this one. Let's drag this other mesh in there, it simplifies it. And the arms as well. So where you can see the mesh for the arms, let's drag this in here and it's heavily simplified. Okay, now it's not taking up as much space in memory, and in terms of actually drawing it, it's so much easier because there are fewer vertices, which also means that it's easier to animate. So if you take a look at it through a simulator, pretty much no change whatsoever. Alright, it still looks exactly the same.